The military prepares for the battlefield, governments prepare for the emergency. But when a major conflict begins affecting ordinary neighbourhoods, families face a problem almost nobody prepares for. Not the explosions, not the headlines, not the first moments of fear. The real challenge comes later, when the phones stop working, when information becomes unreliable, when people no longer know what is happening, who to trust, or how long normal life will last. Because in the modern world, survival is not only about avoiding danger, it is about understanding what happens when the systems you depend on begin to fail. And the first signs are usually not dramatic. They are quiet, a delayed message, a payment that fails, a traffic light that never changes, a grocery shelf that looks slightly emptier than yesterday. Because the real question is not, how would a war look on a battlefield? The real question is, what happens when the battlefield reaches the systems that keep your everyday life running? This is a fictional simulation, not a prediction, not a statement about what will happen. It is a realistic exploration of how ordinary people might experience uncertainty, infrastructure problems, and cascading failures during a major crisis. You live in a quiet suburban neighbourhood, the kind of place where the biggest problems are usually traffic, rising prices, or a neighbour forgetting to bring in their trash cans. Families leave for work every morning. Children go to school. Stores open at the same time every day. The lights turn on. The internet works. Gas stations have fuel. Hospitals are available if someone needs help. You never see these systems. You only notice them when they disappear. Electricity, transportation, communications, banking, food distribution, healthcare, emergency services. Thousands of connected networks working together. And when one system is disrupted, the others begin feeling the pressure. In this scenario, a major global conflict creates uncertainty across multiple countries. The details of how it begins are unknown. Most civilians do not immediately understand the scale. They only know one thing. Something has changed. And within the first 24 hours, an ordinary suburb begins experiencing a chain reaction. Hour 0. At 6:47 in the morning, your day begins like any other. The alarm goes off. The coffee machine turns on. The news plays quietly in the background. Your phone is filled with normal notifications, weather updates, messages, work reminders. Nothing feels different. Then the first interruption happens. The television cuts away from its scheduled program. A government announcement appears. The message is short. There is no panic, no dramatic warning, only a simple instruction. Remain calm. Monitor official information. Prepare for possible disruptions. Then the broadcast ends. 30 seconds later, the television returns to normal programming, and that creates the first strange feeling. Nobody knows how serious this is. Nobody knows what happens next. Some people assume it will be over by tonight. Others begin wondering if this is only the beginning. Because the first danger in any major crisis is not always the event itself. It is uncertainty. When answers disappear, people create their own. A message appears in the neighbourhood group chat. Someone claims they heard something serious. Another person says they know someone inside emergency services. Nobody knows what is true, but everyone wants certainty. And that is when rumours begin. Across the neighbourhood, everyone reacts differently. Some people immediately start preparing. They check their emergency supplies. They fill their vehicles with fuel. They contact family members. Others ignore it completely. They go to work. They take their children to school. They assume the situation will be resolved before the end of the day. Both reactions are understandable, but within the next hour, one group will notice a warning sign most people completely miss. Because at the beginning of a crisis, nobody knows which response is correct. The person preparing may look paranoid. The person ignoring it may look calm. But the real challenge is making decisions with incomplete information. And that problem becomes much bigger when communication systems begin changing. By 7:45 in the morning, something strange happens. Your phone still works, but not perfectly. Some messages send instantly. Others take several minutes. A video someone shares online refuses to load. A news website takes longer than usual to open. At first, nobody worries. The internet has problems sometimes. Networks slow down, servers crash. People have seen this before. But this time, the problem is different. Millions of people are searching for answers at the same time, and small problems begin appearing everywhere. A parent tries calling their child's school. The call will not connect. A worker opens their banking app. Instead of their account, they see an error message. A driver stops at a gas station. Payment systems are moving slower than usual. Emergency operators receive conflicting reports from people seeing completely different versions of the same situation. None of these problems seem catastrophic by themselves, but together they reveal something important. Modern society depends on thousands of systems working at the same time, and when those systems begin slowing down, people search for the one thing they need most: information. Everyone wants the same answers. Is this serious? What happens next? Should we leave? Should we stay? When people lose reliable information, the crisis becomes psychological. A person can prepare for a known problem, but uncertainty creates a different type of stress. Your mind begins creating possibilities, and most of them are worse than reality. By late morning, your neighborhood group chat becomes the center of attention. Hundreds of messages appear. Some are useful, some are rumors, some are completely false. Someone says gas stations are running out of fuel. Someone else says the entire power grid will shut down. Another person claims emergency services are overwhelmed. Nobody knows what is true, and that creates the first major lesson of a modern crisis. Information itself becomes a resource, just like water, just like food, just like fuel. Because bad information can cause people to make dangerous decisions. People rush to stores. People drive unnecessarily. People overload communication networks, not because they are irrational, but because humans are trying to regain control. The family at the center of this story faces their first real decision. Do they panic? Do they ignore everything? Or do they slow down and evaluate what they actually know? Because the biggest mistake during uncertainty is making permanent decisions based on temporary fear. But soon they discover something more concerning. The problem is no longer just information. The first systems around them are beginning to show signs of stress, and the next 12 hours will reveal something most people never consider. Modern life does not collapse all at once. It weakens piece by piece, and tomorrow morning, the neighborhood will wake up to a problem nobody expected. Hour 3. The neighborhood still looks normal. Cars sit in driveways, children are outside, stores are open. But people are behaving differently. Phones are being checked every few minutes. Neighbors are calling relatives. Drivers are checking their fuel gauges. And at the grocery store, something more obvious is happening. The shelves aren't empty, not yet, but people are buying differently. Bottled water, canned food, batteries, medicine, anything they think might become difficult to find later. The strange part is that nobody knows if there will actually be a shortage. They're buying because they don't know. And that creates a strange problem. The shortage doesn't have to happen first. People only have to believe it might. Back in the neighborhood, communication is becoming less reliable. Messages arrive late. Calls fail. Different people are hearing completely different versions of events. One person says everything will be restored soon. Another says the situation is getting worse. Nobody can verify either claim. And that uncertainty is starting to change how people behave. Then, around 2:40 p.m., the lights flicker. Once, twice. Then they come back. This time, nobody goes back to what they were doing. Because the question isn't whether the power came back, it's why it went out. Hour 6. The first shortages appear. By late afternoon, a line forms at a nearby gas station. There is still fuel, but suddenly, everyone wants it. Cars stretch around the block. Drivers wait with their engines running. Some people start wondering if they should fill every container they have. Others leave before reaching the pump. Nobody knows when the next delivery will arrive. The fuel hasn't disappeared, but demand has suddenly surged. Everyone wants more than they normally would. And inside homes, families begin checking what they already have. Food, water, medicine, fuel. They discover something uncomfortable. Most households are prepared for inconvenience, not prolonged disruption. A full refrigerator assumes electricity. A bank account assumes working payment networks. A car assumes fuel. A phone assumes communication. Modern life works because thousands of systems work together. You don't notice the connections until one breaks. Hour 12. By nightfall, the neighborhood is quieter. Then, at approximately 9:30 p.m., the power goes out. This time, it doesn't come back. For the first few minutes, nobody moves. 5 minutes, still dark. 15 minutes, still nothing. 30 minutes. The refrigerator has stopped humming. The Wi-Fi router is dark. The streetlights are gone. And slowly, the assumption changes. Maybe this isn't a normal outage. The family gathers flashlights. They conserve phone batteries. They avoid opening the refrigerator. Outside, neighbors begin talking. Someone checks on an elderly couple. Someone else has a battery-powered radio. For the first time, the neighborhood isn't waiting for someone else to solve the problem. They're starting to adapt themselves. And that matters. Because the first night is easy compared with the days that follow. The real question isn't whether the power will return tonight. It's what happens tomorrow morning, if it doesn't. Hour 18. By early morning, the neighborhood wakes up differently. Everyone checks their phones. They're looking for confirmation that normal life is returning. But the messages are still inconsistent. Some areas report restored services. Others report continued disruptions. And emergency systems are facing the same problem. Too many people need help at the same time. Medical calls, traffic accidents, technical failures, residents looking for information. Emergency services don't exist outside society. They depend on fuel, communications, transportation, hospitals, and trained workers. When several systems struggle at once, even professional responders face limits. Not because they stop caring, because resources are finite. And slowly, the neighborhood begins changing its expectations. At first, people ask, when will someone fix this? Now they ask, what can we do while we wait? That is the beginning of adaptation. People check on neighbors. They conserve supplies. They organize information. They create routines. They stop waiting for normal life to return. They start adapting to the life they have. Hour 24. One full day has passed. And the strange thing is, the neighborhood still exists. There is no movie-style chaos. Most people aren't fighting. Most aren't abandoning their homes. But something important has disappeared. Confidence. People can no longer assume the lights will come on, that stores will open, that payments will work, or that help will arrive immediately. Families begin creating new routines. They check for updates. They conserve water. They plan meals. They check on vulnerable relatives. And slowly, cooperation becomes more important than individual preparation. But the hardest part may come later. At first, adrenaline keeps people focused. Then fatigue arrives. Every decision starts costing more energy. Should we use the flashlight? Should we save the phone battery? Should we drive somewhere? Should we wait? This is decision fatigue, and it can turn a manageable crisis into a series of bad decisions. That is why routines matter. Small routines create structure. Structure creates a sense of control, and control makes it easier to think clearly. The biggest lesson from this simulation is simple. Modern survival is not about escaping civilization. It's about understanding civilization. Electricity affects communication. Communication affects decisions. Transportation affects supplies. Supplies affect health, and health affects communities. Everything connects. The strongest advantage isn't having the most equipment. It's being able to make good decisions when conditions change. The greatest danger in a modern crisis isn't always the event that starts it. It's the chain reaction afterward. One system fails. Another becomes stressed. People react. Demand changes. Information becomes uncertain. And the effects spread. You can't predict every disaster, but you can understand the systems around you. And that understanding can turn uncertainty into better decisions. A major conflict may begin somewhere far away, but its effects can eventually reach ordinary homes, neighborhoods, and communities. The future cannot be predicted. But preparedness isn't about predicting the future. It's about being ready for uncertainty. Because when the systems we depend on are tested, the strongest advantage isn't fear, it's understanding. If you want more realistic survival simulations that explore how modern systems fail and how people can prepare, subscribe. And tell me, which part of this scenario do you think would affect everyday life first?